If you look at any given list of the best people to ever live, it's a safe bet that Mother Teresa is probably on there. She's hailed as the pinnacle of human kindness, and was just recently declared a saint in front of huge crowds at the Vatican. With all this buzz surrounding the world's favorite missionary, what better time than now to think about one important question? Does she deserve the world's love and admiration? Mother Teresa, born Agnes Gonca Bohaciu, was an Albanian Indian Roman Catholic nun and missionary. She was the recipient of many honors, including the Nobel Peace Prize. Most of us were probably taught that she was a kind-spirited missionary who aided the sick and organized charity work. But what most people are not aware of is that Teresa was a controversial figure even while she was still alive. She was both praised and criticized for her anti-abortion views, and she was criticized for the sanitary conditions in the houses for the dying she ran. But let's start at the beginning. Agnes was born August 26, 1910, though she later adopted August 27th, the day she was baptized, as her true birthday. From an early age, she was fascinated by the lives of missionaries, and by age 12, she had made up her mind that she would one day join them. Agnes left home in 1928 at the age of 18 to join the Sisters of Loreto in Rathfarnham, Ireland to learn English, with the goal of becoming a missionary. Agnes took her first vows as a nun on May 24, 1931, in Darjeeling, near the Himalayan mountains where she learned Bengali and taught at St. Teresa's School, a schoolhouse near her convent. At that time, she chose to be named after Thérèse de Lisieux, the patron saint of missionaries. But because that was apparently a popular name at that particular convent, she opted for the Spanish spelling of Teresa. She took her solemn vows on May 14, 1937, while serving as a teacher at the Loreto Convent in eastern Calcutta. There she served for almost 20 years, and in 1944 was appointed head mistress. On September 10, 1946, among the horror of Hindu-Muslim violence, Teresa experienced what she later described as the call within the call. She said, "I was to leave the convent and help the poor while living among them. It was an order. To fail would have been to break the faith." One author later wrote, "Though no one knew it at the time, Sister Teresa had just become Mother Teresa." Teresa quickly began tending to the needs of the destitute and starving. In 1949, she was joined by a group of young women, and together they laid the foundations of a new religious community helping the poorest of the poor. On October 7, 1950, Teresa received Vatican permission to start the congregation that would become the Missionaries of Charity, the foundation for which she is most famous. It began as a small congregation in Calcutta with a mere 13 members. But by 1997, it had grown to more than 4,000 sisters, running orphanages, AIDS hospices, and charity centers around the world. Sounds pretty good, right? Maybe not so much. While Mother Teresa did do more than most people to organize aid for the poor, she was involved in some very shady business practices. Teresa's clinics received millions of dollars in donations, yet their conditions were appalling. There was a disturbing shortage of medical care, systematic diagnosis, and necessary nutrition, as well as a decided lack of painkillers. Teresa once told a cancer patient that pain means Jesus is near you, and that suffering is an opportunity to share in the passion of Christ. Teresa said that she compared suffering to kisses from Jesus, to which the patient replied, "Please tell Jesus to stop kissing me." One of Teresa's most outspoken critics was Christopher Hitchens, the English journalist, literary critic, and anti-theist who wrote the extended essay, The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice. In one article, he wrote, "This returns us to the medieval corruption of the Church, which sold indulgences to the rich while preaching hellfire and continence to the poor. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. She spent her life opposing the only known cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women and the emancipation of them from a livestock version of compulsory reproduction." He went on to accuse her of hypocrisy for opting to receive advanced Western treatment for her heart condition when she routinely denied even painkillers to her patients. Hitchens was called by the Vatican as a witness to give evidence against Teresa's canonization process. During that time, Hitchens had the opportunity to speak to Teresa. He reported, "It was by talking to her that I discovered, and she assured me, that she wasn't working to alleviate poverty. He said, she was working to expand the number of Catholics. She said, I'm not a social worker. I don't do it for this reason. I do it for Christ. I do it for the Church." In keeping with her seemingly masochistic tendencies, on several occasions Teresa only offered prayers and medallions of the Virgin Mary to victims of natural disasters in India, rather than actual aid, monetary or otherwise. Teresa also had some rather dubious political contacts, and she is accused of accepting a financial grant from the Duvalier dictatorship, which is deemed responsible for the murders of over 30,000 Haitians between 1957 and 1986. Finally, and perhaps most disturbingly, Mother Teresa's charitable foundations raised hundreds of millions of dollars during her lifetime, but much of that money appears to have vanished into several secret bank accounts that the nun kept. This is the money that was supposed to fund proper care for the poor and the sick. The most likely explanation is that Teresa, over the course of her life, siphoned millions of dollars out of her charities and into the coffers of the Roman Catholic Church. As we saw before, her allegiance was not with the sick, but with the Church. So what should we make of this? Does Teresa deserve her canonization? By Catholic standards, apparently so. She did more to spread Catholicism than many, many others. However, it was at the expense of the health, comfort, and humanity of her patients. Her hospitals became known as houses of the dying, where she and her sisters would baptize the ailing without their consent or understanding. They were out to make converts, not save lives. If someone got a roof over their head in the process, well, that's great PR. She opposed abortion and birth control in one of the most cripplingly overpopulated countries on Earth, thereby ensuring the vicious cycle of poverty continued. Without this image that the world seems to have crafted for her, it's clear that Teresa was simply not a humanitarian, nor did she claim to be. Her first and only goal was to further the kingdom of God, something that many people, unfortunately, seem to applaud. All this being said, Teresa's legacy is not all bad. As one of Teresa's critics said, if the extraordinary image of Mother Teresa conveyed in the collective imagination has encouraged humanitarian initiatives that are genuinely engaged with those crushed by poverty, we can only rejoice. It is likely that she has inspired many humanitarian workers whose actions have truly relieved the suffering of the destitute and addressed the causes of poverty and isolation without being extolled by the media. Hopefully the next time an enterprising nun shows up to save the day, we'll have some higher standards and end up with a saint that truly deserves the title. If you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to keep up to date with the latest content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.